Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, where we teach you everything you need to land your first job as a software developer by learning to develop yourself, your skills, your network, and more. I'm Brian, your host. Holy moly, the 2024 developer survey from Stack Overflow just dropped, and I think it's important that we take a look at this, especially if you are beginning your career or if you're learning how to code, as a matter of fact, because this can act as a map to tell you what are professional developers doing, what are they learning, what languages are they using, who are they in general. This is a great way to reverse engineer your path towards software developer, because too often we go online and you hear people like me talk about what you should be learning, or some dude on YouTube that has a megaphone essentially and telling you to learn some obscure language that's going to be the thing that's going to get you hired in 2024. Am I guilty of this? I hope not. I try to tell you things that are boring, but also just make sense that I see actually work. I think the problem with YouTube and platforms that really promote, highlight, and encourage hot takes is that you get people that will just say anything in order to get views. The developer survey is not the sexiest thing in the world, but they talked to 65,000 developers that use Stack Overflow, the premier website for getting your questions about coding answered. Yes, even more popular than ChatGPT so far. But let's dive in to see what people are learning, how they're learning it, things you should be knowing, and who the developer community is made up of. Let's take a look at educational attainment among professional developers. 66% of developers have a BA or a BS or an MA or an MS degree, despite only 49% of developers learning to code at school. Very interesting. And what can we make of this? When I read this, I think the traditional path is still the most traditional path, right? Most people go to college. If you want to get into a professional occupation like writing code or being a doctor, you're going to go to school, right? The majority of developers are not self-taught. The majority didn't go to a boot camp, and the majority just took the traditional path. They went to a school and they probably learned computer science. Is that decreasing? Yeah, a little bit. But every company I've been in, I've been the minority in many, many ways. But when I talk about the minority, I'm speaking about going from a boot camp, having a BA in like liberal arts. That's just not a normal thing, or it wasn't at least, in coding professions for a while, to be honest. And I remember getting this question when I used to apply for jobs when I first started looking for work as a developer. They asked me, well, if you have a degree in liberal arts, why do you want to code? Why are you here trying to be a software developer? I haven't got asked that question in a really long time, but it is interesting how that used to be more of a point of discussion than other times. This is something I wouldn't take too seriously. And one thing I want to really impart to you is to please, if you are above the age of 25 or have kids and a family or any kind of adult life, don't think that going back to get a bachelor's degree or a master's degree is the way to get hired. That is actually the most roundabout, expensive way I could possibly imagine to get hired as a developer. If you are on the coasts, your degree means way, way less than you probably think it does. And most job descriptions you'll read, they say equivalent experience or a computer science degree. Let me tell you something. If you're good enough and you can get your foot in the door to get to an interview and you pass the interview, I can pretty much guarantee you they're not going to care about your college degree at that point already. They're going to have already sunk so much time and investment that they're just going to want to hire you at that point. I've never met anybody. I haven't ever had this happen where my lack of a computer science degree has held me back from any type of job ever. So hopefully that's helpful for you to know. Please go get a bachelor's degree if you're like 18 or 20. It's probably the really safe bet to do. If you're not, consider a boot camp, consider some other program, consider doing something else. Let's take a look at how many years people have been coding professionally. Another interesting one. 1 in 3 developers have been coding professionally for 4 years or less. Really interesting, which also leads me to believe that the younger demographic that make up the majority of coders that are terminally online are basically making an echo chamber of their experiences, which is what is, I think, driving a lot of the social media dialogue around what it's like to get a job and learning how to code, which has basically been a ton of doom and gloom. I mean, more so than I've ever seen in my life. And to be completely honest, I don't see it in my personal life. I don't know anybody else that's like suffering from the lack of jobs out there. I am giving recommendations to two more of my coworkers that were laid off with me. The other three have been hired. I got hired twice, which I have an episode on. A person from Parsity who's in his 40s just got hired. I'm doing an episode with him. Anyway, I can go on and on and on and on about all the people I'm seeing get hired. And you might call this survivor's bias or whatever. And I'll just tell you this. I've talked to hundreds of people. I look at the statistics like U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and I'm seeing that hiring seems to be trending up. It seems to be correcting, and it seems to be basically at the same levels that we were seeing 5 years ago or so. So this doom and gloom stuff, I'm not seeing it. But if you've only been in the industry for 1 to 4 years, this is probably a really terrible time. Because if you came in at the height of the pandemic boom and you're experiencing what is now a bust, then that can't feel good. You probably were used to riding times of all the big bonuses and people falling all over themselves to hire developers who barely knew how to write code out of a paper bag, and now you're feeling the pinch. But the reality is that most developers I speak to that are older, like in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, say, yeah, this isn't so much different from what they experienced in the 90s or the 2000s or other periods of time when, offshore development or other frameworks that were supposed to replace developers came out, like WordPress, for example. So, it's something to think about. Think about how long the average developer that you're reading about online has been coding, and apparently it's not very long. Now, this is the section that I think is really interesting. What are the developer types out there? We talk about full stack, back end, front end. These are the top 3 roles that are reported by developers for the last 3 years. And what's interesting is that front end developers have decreased from 6.6% to 5.6% since last year. Moreover, more developers identify as students than as front-end developers nowadays, which is wild to me. More students than front-end developers? That's crazy, but I have a lot of thoughts on this. First of all, what is full stack? What is back-end? What is front-end? Front-end is the stuff that you interact with on a website that's on the front-facing client side. Like think if you go to Google or something like that, there's a search bar and you're typing in things on the screen. You click on stuff, you interact with stuff. Typically involves JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. Backend, this is where the database layer is, or things that are on a server that often doesn't have a visual component to it. So think about where you store all the data. You go on LinkedIn or Instagram and you like some girl's picture or you like some dude's picture that's topless in a bikini or shorts on a beach, right? That like gets stored in perpetuity on a server somewhere on a server farm in Iowa where your data and that like that you posted that you're ashamed of now lives forever unless you delete it. It's the reason why you can go back on Instagram or LinkedIn, you can refresh the page, and all the likes and all the posts that you have that you've posted are still there because they're being stored somewhere in a database. If they were stored all on your browser, it would crash because there's way too much data on your browser that your browser couldn't support that much data, basically. Now, what is full stack? Basically, it's people who kind of play on both ends of this. And when I think of full stack, I generally think of people that are a little stronger on the front end, but know some back end. This is typically where I've fallen throughout my career. I'm a full stack software engineer. It means I can write some back end and I can write some front end. Generally, people will be stronger on one end than the other. If you're a full stack dev, it's usually not expected that you're like equally strong. Like there's definitely people that are way more back end focused that kind of aren't so good at doing things like writing CSS. And then there's other people like me maybe that are a little bit better at JavaScript, but not so great at database schemas and things like working with SQL and Mongo and things like that. Anyway, full stack is where 30% of developers identify as. Backend 16%, students 8.6%, and front end at 5.6%. Oh my God, what is going on with the front end landscape? I'll tell you what I think is going on. And one of the reasons why at Parsity, we started introducing the framework Next.js, which is related to this because the framework that React, the most popular UI front end JavaScript library ever invented, or at least the most popular one for now, they have made a decision to be full stack. They went in from being completely front end to saying, you know what? We're going to partner up with Next.js and we're going to make our components and all the stuff that you're used to doing on the front end. We're going to turn that full stack, right? And you're coming along with us, whether you like it or not, bucko, right? So if you're a React developer, almost overnight, you've been told, hey, guess what? React has server components, things that work on a back end. Guess what? We're working with Next.js now, a back-end full stack framework that lets you write front-end code and back-end code in the same place. Boom. This is the official framework for React. So take that. So now a lot of developers who used to just be writing front-end code are now expected, well, hey, you already know JavaScript. Why don't you just work on this backend piece here? We have this Next.js framework. Now you can write queries to Mongo and SQL in here and do your front-end code here without having to bother the backend people. Perfect, right? Maybe. I just think it means, though, that if you're going into coding and you want to just do front-end in quotes, front-end is difficult. Let me be very clear. There are a lot of really, really excellent front-end devs. I was a front-end dev for a very long time, and I got to tell you, I think there are some complexities on the front end that you don't see in the back end, and vice versa. So I don't want to trivialize or diminish what front-end developers do, because I think there's too much of that junk online. But I'd say if I was learning to code right now, I certainly would not constrain myself to front-end, because if you look at only a tiny percentage of the professional developer population is front-end, why the hell would you want to go in that bucket? Learn full stack, and then if you want to specialize in front end, go ahead and do that. But maybe don't only learn front end if you want to be a hireable developer. I'm sure I'll get a lot of pushback on that one, and if you feel a strong way about that, or you say, nah, you're totally wrong, let me know. Send me some fan mail or something like that, or hit me up on LinkedIn and tell me I'm a dummy. Let's take a look at the most popular technologies. This should come as no shock to you. When we look at what professional developers are using, JavaScript is the most popular programming language in the world. Right under that is SQL, Structured Query Language, which is wild that more places don't teach that. In fact, at Parsity, I'm making a decision. We're going to start teaching SQL. It's been too long. I'm using Mongo at work. I've used MongoDB throughout my career so far. I've used a little bit of SQL in the past, but it is so popular and you just can't avoid it. Why not teach it? So I'm actually working with a guy now to do our Python data engineering course and also have SQL for everybody that's ever been in Parsity. So if you're an alumni or you're planning on going, you'll have access to that. No matter who you are, if you've ever gone to Parsity, have any relationship to us, you're going to get access to that. Next on the list is HTML and CSS. Of course, it's the thing you have to know. Python, and now TypeScript. TypeScript is a thing that you are beginning to need to know more and more. I used to try to avoid TypeScript. Now I work with it professionally. And let me tell you, it's not as bad as I made it sound. In fact, I added a curriculum to Parsity that introduces TypeScript because the reality is you don't need to be a TypeScript wizard to know TypeScript. If you know JavaScript, you're halfway there. And if you're using Next.js, using TypeScript is really trivial. It comes out of the box and it's fairly simple to set up. And one of the problems we have with students now in Parsity, or one of the challenges we give to students at Parsity, is to fix a TypeScript app and to add TypeScript to a Next.js app. It's a great introduction to TypeScript. I can guarantee you that over the years, you're going to see it get more and more and more popular. I, for one, am not a huge fan of it, but I do know that it can save a lot of headaches. And if you're interested in learning about TypeScript, let me know. I would love to do an episode on that one, or maybe I'll do like a YouTube video or something like that, because that's probably easier to follow along with. So Python, TypeScript, pretty close in popularity. So if you're going to learn anything, I don't know why people do this thing where I'm going to learn Ruby. 5.8% of professional developers now use Ruby, apparently. And this is not to say only learn what makes money or what professional people are doing. I'm just saying, if you want to be hireable and you want to basically have opportunities that are going to be abundant and not constrain yourself, then maybe just learn what the most popular things are, like JavaScript, HTML, CSS, SQL, maybe Python. And if you're already learning JavaScript, why not just learn TypeScript, right? I mean, you don't have to overcomplicate this stuff. I should also add, there's no hack, right? You can learn this stuff and still be unhireable. There are people that learn Java and C# and are very hireable depending on the parts of the United States they live in. And there are people that just do their own thing and are still hireable. I'm just trying to give you what makes the most sense as a very generic path to take, because that is what I really want to do. Because I feel like too many people overcomplicate it or tell you what's cool instead of telling you what is reality. Let's move on to databases. PostgreSQL is the number one most used database. Crazy. and MySQL, it takes up the 1, 2, 3, 4, takes up some form of SQL are the top 4 choices for databases, and right under it is MongoDB. We teach MongoDB at Parsity, and to be honest, I don't know why all boot camps at one point decided to teach MongoDB. I guess it was easier, quote unquote, to set up back in the days. But honestly, SQL is becoming so easy to set up now that it's one of the many reasons that I really want to move our curriculum to use SQL, because MongoDB is really popular, but SQL is just more popular. And why not? It's actually a little bit easier, in my opinion, to learn than Mongo because it feels more natural and it works with columns and rows. And if you come from a background of working professionally with like Excel, then it's really not that big of a jump. Now for cloud platforms. This should come as no shock to you. Amazon Web Services is the most popular by far, by a long shot. I one time wrote a post about why you should deploy your app on AWS, Amazon Web Services, and somebody like actually called me out for it. They said, "Oh, that's just being, you're being biased or something like that, or what's wrong with using Netlify?" I'm like, well, there's nothing wrong with using anything, really. I mean, the whole point is to get your code out somewhere. But the reason why I strongly suggest using Amazon Web Services is because it is what the majority of professional developers are using. And you want to be able to speak the same language as the people you're trying to get hired by, right? Doesn't that make sense to you? So Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, Cloudflare, and Firebase all round out the top 5. DigitalOcean, Vercel, Heroku, Netlify, all there, kind of taking up bits of space down there. Vercel is coming up with 11%. It beat Heroku and Netlify. I'm using Vercel professionally. I guarantee you 100% it's going to jump up year after year after year. I'm taking a bet on this and introducing it in Parsity. In fact, a lot of our curriculum for full stack now centers around using Next.js and Vercel. By the way, a cloud platform is simply a collection of servers that you can manage that are not yours. In a real nutshell, you think of the cloud, it's servers and services that are over the web that you don't own. So you want to have a bunch of storage to put millions of pictures for your users and things like that. You have a choice of having a computer at your house that can do that, or you can literally rent computers over the web from a person like Amazon Web Services, from Jeff Bezos. You say, "Hey, Jeff, I need 1 million servers." And he's like, "Yeah, I got you, bro. I'll send you the bill. Don't even trip," right? And that's how that works. You're renting Jeff Bezos's servers at these farms he has all around the world. Okay, let's get down to web frameworks and technologies. Node.js, most popular, which is kind of shocking. I just really didn't expect that one at all. And React.js, they're neck and neck. So React and Node.js, wow, did not expect Node.js to be that high up there. Guess what the third one is? jQuery. Guess what's fourth? Angular. And guess what's fifth? .NET Core. And then Next.js, Express, and Vue down there. People love Vue. But the reality is it doesn't look like, it doesn't look like it's the most popular, but it's definitely climbing in popularity. So what does this mean? React is here to stay. We all know that. Front-end development has become synonymous with React development, which I think is a shame because honestly, React it's a framework. It's a library / basically a framework, a way to write front-end code that's very opinionated in many ways. And now it's become synonymous with front-end. No one is writing naked, plain, vanilla JavaScript anymore. If you are writing code for the front end, you're almost certainly using React. And if you're writing any JavaScript code on the back end, you're almost certainly using Node.js. So why not learn these things? These will make you highly employable, and I've seen these at basically every single company I've ever worked at in some form or fashion. From the really old one you would never guess to the startup down the street that's building things that's trying to be the next unicorn startup and blow up and get $1 billion from Jeff Bezos or Zuckerberg, whoever these investors are out there. Anyway, these are things you should learn, right? React, Node.js, jQuery, don't learn that. The reason why jQuery is so high up on the list here is what I suspect is that it is a dependency. It is used in a lot of these really popular frameworks like React. So therefore, you see that it's popular being used, but maybe not used directly. I can only guess. If really this many people are still using jQuery, I'm blown away. We actually deleted that from the Parsity curriculum because I'm like, there's no way we're learning jQuery in this day and age. But maybe we should. I don't know. All right, what are developers using to code? Well, they're using Visual Studio Code. 74% are using Visual Studio Code, 29% using Visual Studio. Wow. Wow. So Visual Studio Code being the choice is just dominating the industry right now. And every place I've ever gone, everybody's using it. So it's really cool if you get good at Visual Studio Code. And I have a video on this, by the way, on my YouTube channel and a podcast episode I did on this and an article. That's how seriously I take Visual Studio Code. Because if you're good at using it, and good meaning, do you know the keyboard shortcuts? Can you fly around on the editor? Do you know some basic things like copying and pasting or how to search and navigate through files? This makes you a better developer. It makes you more fun to work with. It makes your life as a developer more fun. And because this is a skill that is transferable, meaning if you're good at Visual Studio Code, this will help you in your interviews when you're starting to code in front of people. This will help you when you go to the next company. This will help you at your current company. This will help you in your personal life. So why not get good at it? Because everybody apparently uses Visual Studio Code. Now I want to end on this one because this is a question that I just don't stop getting asked. Is it worth learning to code because of AI? Are you nervous about AI for the last time? No. I'm less nervous than I was 6 months ago, and I was less nervous 6 months ago than I was the previous 6 months. So I am absolutely not nervous at all about AI stuff, but let's read about what other developers think about AI. So how many developers use AI tools as they're developing? When it comes to professional developers, 63% do. When it comes to people learning to code, 63% do as well. I am one of those 63%. I use Copilot, I use ChatGPT, and you may be thinking, well, if you can just do that with those tools, then like, what are you doing all day? I'm thinking of complex problems generally to solve. Like I'm thinking, okay, I need to make a database call here to fetch this data, and then I need to massage it to get into some shape like this, and then it needs to be passed to this page. And what I'm doing with ChatGPT is saying, well, hey, how do I write the query? Like here's what I need to get. Cool. Now I'm going to take the data from that query and maybe change it up a little bit, and maybe I'll run some help writing the function that does that, or maybe I'll get some feedback on the function I wrote. Could I ask it to do all those things and like basically paste together a string of functions and different logic? Absolutely not. It's just not equipped for that kind of thing. It's great at doing smaller tasks. I use it like hell to style stuff. When it comes to styling things with Tailwind or doing responsive design, which it still can't do that well, honestly, I will straight up dump my code in there and say, style this for me, make it mobile responsive. I love doing that kind of stuff with it. Now, what about AI tool sentiment? When it comes to AI tool sentiment, 72% of all respondents are favorable or very favorable to AI tools for development. This was less than last year. Now, that's probably because people are using it more. So last year, it was 77% favorability. This year is 72% favorability. What do you think that means? A full 5% of people think less or worse of AI than they did last year. Probably because they're using it more. I pay for ChatGPT. I pay for Copilot. I'm definitely seeing the return on my investment, but I'm also seeing that it doesn't really produce very good code. It's just average at best. Sometimes it's wrong. A lot of times it's wrong. You cannot trust what it gives you. It's a good starting point, but it absolutely is not production-ready code. And if you are just blindly copying and pasting stuff from ChatGPT into a code base for users to use, you're doing something very dangerous and you should stop. Please don't do that. Okay, and very lastly, are AI tools a threat to your job? What do developers really think? When it comes to people learning to code, 27% say, I'm not sure. 15% say yes. 57% say no. When it comes to professional developers, a whopping 70% say no. Only 11% say yes, which is really interesting. That's a pretty sharp divide between those learning to code and professional developers. So the people that are in this profession writing code overwhelmingly think, nah, this ain't going to do nothing that I'm doing right now. It's not nearly ready for that kind of thing. But people learning to code that may not know a lot yet about what it takes to be a successful developer or what it takes to write code or the kind of complexities you're dealing with on a daily basis, they don't know what they don't know yet. And a lot more of them, maybe you, do perceive it as a threat. I cannot tell you the future. Right? I can only tell you what this survey says and what I think in the moment. In 5 years from now, I might look back and say, wow, I was totally wrong. They were coming for us the whole time. And now we're all replaced and having to trade, biscuits and scones and stones out in the streets. And, we're screwed. By the way, if there is a day when computers can do the job of developers fully, then I think every profession is screwed. So at that point, I think we have a much bigger problem to worry about. Anyways, I hope this survey is helpful. I definitely think you should check it out, especially if you are new to software engineering. And lastly, if you are ready to join Parsity and become a success story, work in a very small cohort, 10 people max. That is the secret sauce, honestly. You think about these really big boot camps where people can copy and paste their way through them and don't get any one-on-one attention. I heard a horror story about one where this guy had to wait till 10 p.m. like on a Monday with 100 other students to get his questions answered. And I thought, people are paying for that kind of stuff? They're paying more for that than going to Parsity. To me, it's a no-brainer. It truly is. I really don't know why anybody would choose to go to that over Parsity. Maybe you found somewhere else. I hope you have found somewhere better than that. But if you do want to join, be quick, because this Friday is the deadline to get that big discount, which I want you to get. And you can work with me one-on-one, and we have like 4 spots left. So maybe I'll see you there. Anyway, hope that was helpful. See you around. That'll do it for today's episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. To learn more about becoming a software engineer with us, then check out parsity.io. If you're not quite ready for that, then jump into our dev30.xyz program, which is 30 days of working on your mindset, habits, and JavaScript skills. Totally worth it. See you next week.